At 6 o'clock, a budget for an election. The Chancellor targets home buyers and pensioners. He promises the elderly a £200 rebate in their council tax.
Stability the foundation, investment not cuts, every child the best start in life, a budget for Britain's hard-working families and pensioners. I commend this budget to the House.
Michael Howard says the Chancellor has put Labour before the country.
This is a vote now, pay later budget.
Also tonight, the McCartneys take their fight for justice to the top. US Senator Ted Kennedy says disband the IRA. Iraq's new parliament meets but can't decide what sort of government it wants. And what are the chances of this happening again? Scientists say another tsunami is highly likely.
Tonight on BBC London News, big breaks from the Chancellor, so why is London still feeling shortchanged and searching for a serial killer? Did the same man murder Marsha and Amelie and also try to kill Kate Sheedy?
Good evening and welcome to the 6 o'clock news. Gordon Brown's delivered his 9th budget and the last one before an election which could be just weeks away. That's the word in Westminster. In a carefully targeted giveaway, pensioners and home buyers are the winners. The Tory leader, Michael Howard, called it a vote now, pay later budget, which put Labour's interests before the country.
Well, the winners in today's budget seem to have been carefully chosen by the Chancellor. Home buyers won't have to pay stamp duty on properties worth less than £120,000, and that's double the current figure. The point at which inheritance tax is paid will rise to £300,000 over the next 3 years. All pensioners are to get a refund of £200 to help them pay their council tax, but only for this year. And all pensioners in England will get free bus travel from next year. But there's no change to income tax or to national insurance. We're going to be bringing you all the details of the Chancellor's budget announcements throughout the programme. First, though, let's cross to Westminster and talk to our political editor, Andrew Marr. Andrew.
Hello. Well, he's become a familiar figure and his budget language was familiar, but this was different. It was a pre-election budget. Gordon Brown's eyes were, as ever, fixed on the long-distance future, but his hands were scattering sweeteners as he went. The supporting cast around him may come and go, but the man in the middle has become almost as much a fixture of the British spring as the Cheltenham Gold Cup. A little heavier, a little greyer. This is Gordon Brown's 9th budget, and some mutter perhaps his last. But it's given him a record to wallow in, and wallow he did.
Before each budget time, we have heard predictions of a recession. Predictions wrong in 1997, in 1998, in 1999, and wrong again in the years from 2000 to now. Most recently, the budget forecast for 2004 of growth at or above 3% was said to be a deliberate misrepresentation of Britain's economic position. Not to meet it, said the Leader of the Opposition, was to destroy credibility. And I can now report that growth for 2004 is, as forecast, 3.1%.
And growth was in the air. It was like the first day of spring at a milder Westminster. But after a nervous start, Labour's election team had been looking to the budget to help brighten the country's political mood. And without going wild, Mr Brown did his best.
I can afford tax cuts for hard-working families. For home buyers, I propose to set a new threshold for stamp duty from midnight tonight. I will raise the residential stamp duty starting threshold, doubling it to £120,000.
And looking further ahead, a major part of his pitch was the need to modernise education.
We will now establish a building programme for primary schools too. In each of the next 3 years, for primary schools alone, the Secretary for Education will invest more. And as we move this new programme forward, over 8,900 primary schools will be rebuilt or refurbished, an average of 15 per each constituency.
And at the other end of the age spectrum, one disenchanted group who actually do vote are pensioners.
I can announce that we will pay to every pensional household, 65 and over, paying council tax, a refund not of £50, but a council tax refund of £200.
An obvious attempt, that, to torpedo the Tory promise to give pensioner households 50% discounts on council tax, up to £500. Blatant electioneering. A revved-up Tory leader was ready with jibes of his own.
Labour's faltering campaign will not be helped by this vote now, pay later budget. We can all see the sweeteners, but let me tell you what they hide. They hide the crippling tax rises for hard-working families that are inevitable if Labour wins. They hide the massive waste of taxpayers' money that defines this government.
The Tories, by contrast, think they still have £4 billion extra of tax cuts to offer and can't wait to offer them.
People will face a clear choice at the election. More waste and higher taxes under Labour, or lower taxes and value for money with the Conservatives. That's the battleground at this election. That's what this election is going to be all about. And I say, bring it on!
Bring it on? For the Liberal Democrat leader, the whole display was a bit tawdry.
That vote for us and your taxes can go down and the national debt can be reduced and spending can go up and the sun will shine 24 hours a day. People are not stupid about this sort of thing. What they do want to know is, what are the priorities that you are putting forward? I've mentioned our priority about getting rid of the council tax and replacing it with a fairer local income tax.
Let battle commence. Within weeks there will be an election, and for him too, everything may be different. Where next? Well, there's another door. Same size, different number, which would suit. First, though, of course, Labour has to win that election, Tony Blair has to move aside, and Gordon Brown has to be chosen. And all of that is a great deal likelier for Gordon Brown if he retains trust and isn't simply seen as the man who flutters around the fivers.
Andrew, thank you.
So that's the politics of the budget speech. What about the numbers? Our economics correspondent, Hugh Pym, has been looking at the figures. Hugh.
Well, George, there may be big headline payouts in this budget, but if you read the fine print, you see that Gordon Brown's budget overall is not a giveaway. So what's happening? Well, he's giving money out with one hand to targeted groups of electors, and wait for it, he's taking money back in from other sources, including business. So let's look at a few examples of how that works. First, let's look at the cash going out. There's £800 million to cover the pensioners' council tax payout. £235 million is the cost of not raising fuel duties for motorists. And £250 million is his boost for home buyers with the stamp duty threshold raised. So what's coming back in? Well, the answer is more than £1 billion extra from tax on North Sea oil companies. And while he helped the housing market on stamp duty, he's done the opposite to companies investing in low-income areas, with more than £340 million saved by the abolition of a commercial stamp duty relief. And in the next financial year, all his measures bring in more than they pay out. So can he afford his spending plans? He's banking on higher tax revenues from companies like this chocolate maker in Bristol. Elizabeth Shaw has expanded fast, so its tax bill has gone up, and that's provided budget sweeteners for the Chancellor.
In terms of contribution to the National Exchequer, I can tell you that every month I sign a cheque for in excess of £70,000 in terms of national insurance and income tax, which is going off to central government. So that's the best part of £1 million going in that route.
But Gordon Brown is cutting it fine with his budget sums. He set himself a golden rule, which, remember, is all about balancing the books over the ups and downs of the economy. Last year, he said he'd do that with a safety margin of £11 billion. Now he's revised that down to just £6 billion. Small change when you're talking about hundreds of billions of pounds worth of spending. In the past, he has defied his critics, but experts are still saying he'll eventually be forced to raise taxes.
Well, the Chancellor's measures today haven't made a great deal of impact on the long-term outlook for the public finances. So that still confronts him with the difficult problem. Does he believe that tax revenues are going to come in as strongly as he hopes over the next few years? If, like many independent commentators, you start to have doubts about that, then it looks like tax increases are going to have to be announced again after the election.
Gordon Brown's moved on to ground occupied by the opposition parties. They've already set out policies on council tax and stamp duty for home buyers. But there are still real differences on tax. The Conservatives say they'll go further with cuts. The Liberal Democrats want to raise tax on the wealthy to pay for measures to help students and the elderly. Voters will take their pick. George.
Hugh, thank you.
Well, as we've heard, the threshold for stamp duty has doubled to £120,000. And that'll mean nearly 400,000 more home buyers will escape paying the duty. John Kay has been speaking to one couple trying to buy their first home.
They want to live together, but they're 140 miles apart.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you, all right?
Yeah, I'm all right. How are you?
Saeed's in London, living with his parents, and Rosanna's gone back to Bristol to live with hers.
I miss you.
Yeah, I miss you too.
Yeah.
This is the only way they can save up to buy their first home, and they think today's change in stamp duty will help.
Every penny is a step in the right direction as far as I'm concerned.
So you might be together soon.
Oh, let's hope so. Fingers crossed.
Well, this is the kind of property that Saeed and Rosanna are looking for. It's a one-bedroom flat in Bristol, currently on the market for just under £120,000. Now, if they bought this place before today, they'd have had to spend more than £1,000 in stamp duty. From now on, though, it's stamp duty exempt, so they won't pay a penny. Great news on the face of it, but how many first-time buyers will this really help?
Not many, say these local estate agents. Most properties here cost a lot more than the new threshold, and the move could simply attract the buy-to-let brigade rather than first-timers.
For this to have really helped, we believe that they should have maybe identified it specifically for first-time buyers and not investors, and the limit needed to be a minimum of £150,000.
For Saeed and Rosanna, the hard work and house hunting go on. Their big fear now is that a surge in demand may push prices even higher. John Kay, BBC News.
Well, Gordon Brown also announced ways in which the government was saving money. Efficiency savings of £2 billion have already been achieved, and the civil service is cutting costs. 7,800 jobs have moved out of London.
The number of government agencies regulating business will be cut from 35 to 9. And Mr Brown promised further cuts in red tape with 1 million fewer business inspections a year. Let's talk now to our economics editor, Evan Davis, who's in Downing Street. Evan, good evening to you. This is, of course, a pre-election budget. How generous do you think the Chancellor's been today?
Well, Sian, you've been talking about cuts in waste and cuts in quangos. There's a reason for that. Money is pretty tight. And in this budget, the Chancellor has actually net given away nothing. This is not like budgets of chancellors in previous election years where they've given away a lot. The Chancellor has made a generous offer to pensioners, but it's a one-off. And one-off offers cost much, much less than permanently, for example, cutting council tax. He's clawing the money back from North Sea oil companies, for example. I, in a way, if I was looking for a colourful metaphor, would say Gordon Brown is like a school dinner provider. He's been given 37p and told to provide the most tasty, appealing meal he possibly can. And he's done a bit better than the turkey Twizzler, but still, there's only so far you can go with 37p.
But just how sustainable is this? I mean, the Tories are saying it's a vote now, pay later budget. If Labour do get in the next election, will they increase taxes?
Well, over the course of this Parliament, Gordon Brown has pretty well had to come in every budget and say, look, I'm sorry, guys, I haven't got as much money as I thought. And today was no exception. Now, over the next Parliament, he says everything is going to be OK because tax revenues are going to really jump. He's relying on them jumping, in fact, to pay for his spending plans. He says he won't need to raise taxes because the revenues are going to come in on their own. There will, more of us as we get richer will be paying higher rate tax, companies will get more profitable. What the other side is saying is he's being far too optimistic. The tax revenues aren't going to come in on their own. He's going to have to stand up in next year's budget if he is there and actually raise taxes. And I think that issue over whether the tax revenues will come in on their own or not, whether growth will deliver tax, that I think is going to be one of the big battlegrounds for the election.
Evan, thank you.
Now let's take a look at some of the other measures in the Chancellor's budget. There'll be a penny on a pint of beer and 4p on a bottle of wine. But no change to the duty on spirits. Cigarettes will rise by 7p a packet.
Personal tax allowances, that's the point at which we start paying tax, is to rise to just under £4,900. There's no change in fuel duty. It'll stay the same until at least September. And the Chancellor also announced there's to be a new memorial to the Queen Mother to be built on the Mall.
Well, the leader of the Scottish National Party, Alex Salmond, said the Chancellor had failed the tartan test as there were no measures to boost the Scottish economy. And Simon Thomas of Plaid Cymru called it a budget for Middle England.
All the sweeteners that were there for the pensioners, for the council tax, for the schools and so forth were really England-only policies because, for example, free bus passes, we already have them in Wales. So it's clearly designed to appease people for the next month or so.
Well, let's talk now to our political editor, Andrew Marr. Andrew, we're all calling it an election budget. If it is, what does it tell us about the shape of a campaign?
Well, I don't think that the individual measures, the sweeteners so-called, are going to have a transforming effect on the electorate. They're just not big enough in terms of size, though they're quite eye-catching. Much more important is the question of trust and the economy generally. The opposition parties are arguing that in the end, the black hole is real, that taxes will have to go up if you re-elect Labour, and that they've basically been lucky so far. Gordon Brown's pitch is that over the past 9 budgets, he has proved himself an absolutely secure, reassuring Chancellor who knows where he wants to take this country. A bit of redistribution, help for the people at the bottom, but never taking risks with the economy. Now, conventional wisdom says if the economy is going well, it's very, very hard to knock out a sitting government. The Conservatives are going to try and do that above all by looking at the issue of waste and value for money.
So briefly, Andrew, from what you say, this places Gordon Brown himself very well.
Well, Gordon Brown is in an odd position. He still doesn't yet finally know exactly what role he's going to play in the Labour Party campaign. You might find that pretty odd. I think a lot of people will do. But the truth of the matter is the economy is definitely going to be central to the campaign. That means Gordon Brown has to be central. A lot of people say the smaller the Labour Party majority, the likelier it is that Tony Blair moves on in due course early on, and then Gordon can come in to power. But nobody, least of all Gordon Brown, can go into an election campaign with anything less than full-on enthusiasm. He too has to be fighting for the maximum possible Labour majority.
Andrew, thank you.
The time now, 17 minutes past 6.
A reminder of tonight's top stories. An election on his mind. Pensioners and home buyers are winners in Gordon Brown's budget.
Michael Howard says the Chancellor has put his party ahead of the country. He's called it a vote now, pay later budget.
Later on BBC London News. Abandoned and rotting in Kensington Gardens, why has Henry